Good afternoon, everybody. Robert Reeves, District 54, State Representative, and also House Democratic Leader. We appreciate all of you being here today, and definitely appreciate my colleagues and also former colleague and Attorney General Stein, who has come here today. And we're here today because we want to discuss the failure of this body to produce a budget. As many of you know, at the beginning of the session, one of the things that we talked firmly about was we were going to speed through everything, get all this done, streamline our process so that we could have a budget. And here we stand on this date in July and still do not have a budget. At this point, Republicans have supermajorities in both the House and the Senate, so there's nothing on our side to stop anything from going through for a budget. But yet we're still waiting for school personnel to get raises, for state employees to get raises, for critical funding for a lot of the needs that we have going on throughout the state. And of course, one of the biggest things that's lingering above us would be Medicaid expansion. We have done all that we can do on our side to try to make these things happen. House and Senate Democrats released their budget proposals, House Bill 569 and 581, with those coming from the House. And through all of this, all we've wanted to do is try to get something to help move North Carolina forward. Medicaid expansion is one of the big issues that we have looming over our heads. As many of you know, the Healthcare Access and Stabilization Program, or HASP as it's known, along with Medicaid expansion, have to go live at the same time. If they don't go live at the same time, then we're looking at losing an extra $60 million that could be coming into North Carolina. This month alone, we have 9,000 people who will lose Medicaid coverage that would otherwise keep it. The sign-in bonus for expansion includes $1.8 billion. $1 billion of that would go to mental health funding. All of this through Medicaid expansion. And with some of the clawbacks that are happening under the COVID laws with the federal government, we may be looking at losing more money. So again, it is imperative that we come up with a budget that we can get passed. And of course, part of the holdup that we have heard not being involved in the process are things that don't have to do with the budget. The budget itself is what we should be concentrating on and what we should be trying to get past at this point in time. And so I want to echo Governor Cooper's urge to decouple Medicaid expansion from the budget, because we're looking at a prolonged standoff, it seems, and try to at least get that part done so that we can make sure that folks that need this insurance are insured. But also, we need to keep in mind that everybody in this state is waiting on something from this budget, especially state employees, and we owe it to them to provide the best that we can. And with that being said, I would introduce to you Attorney General Josh Stein, who will be talking to you about law enforcement.
Leader Reeves, thank you for having me today. Thank you and this oppressive array of public servants. Could not be more grateful for the good work you all do. And some of y'all feel free to come over here and balance out the room.
I'm so glad you did that for us. We were itching to do it.
There are a number of important issues at stake in this budget. Keeping people safe, keeping people healthy, educating our kids, and helping working families make ends meet. These are critical issues that all deserve attention from this North Carolina General Assembly. Meanwhile, the legislature has been legislating on culture wars that tear us apart rather than on focused on moving our state forward. I'm here to highlight one such issue that serves us all, making our communities safer. Public-spirited law enforcement officers play a huge role in protecting the people of North Carolina. We are incredibly grateful to law enforcement for their dedication and their bravery. But too many cities, towns, counties are experiencing shortages of law enforcement officers in their departments. And I do not meet with a chief or a sheriff these days without hearing about their challenges hiring and keeping good officers on the job. That's why my office has been working in conjunction with the Chiefs Association and the Sheriff's Association and others to develop a series of proposals to improve recruitment and retention of law enforcement officers in North Carolina. Some of the ideas that we are championing include expanding the Criminal Justice Fellows Program, which helps young people start their education and become law enforcement officers. Offering hiring bonuses to new or out-of-state law enforcement officers or military police. running public service awareness campaigns out of state to highlight all that we know is great about North Carolina, eliminating the pension penalty to enable retired officers to come back to work without impacting that retirement, offering bonuses for additional education or training to create career pathways for officers to ensure that they are getting the skills they need to succeed and have incentives to stay on the job, providing important mental health resources for law enforcement. Finally, using trained civilians to respond to minor car accidents, freeing up sworn police officers to respond more quickly to other more serious calls. My office has talked with folks in the General Assembly of both parties about all of these ideas, but neither the House nor the Senate proposed budgets do nearly enough to address the real challenges that I hear about from law enforcement on a regular basis. And I am pleased that the Civilian Traffic Investigators Bill has been passed into law and that there is interest in expanding the Criminal Justice Fellows Program, but we want to see much more to meet the moment. And that is why I am urging the Budget Conference Committee to appropriate the resources necessary to help local law enforcement agencies hire and keep good cops. It is not enough to say that we honor and respect the work of law enforcement. We need to put our money where our mouths are. The people of North Carolina need and deserve more public-spirited guardians to serve as law enforcement officers in the state. Being a cop or a deputy is incredibly challenging work. It's hard work, but my goodness, it is important work. It is rewarding work. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that police departments and sheriff's offices are well-staffed and well-supported because the safety of North Carolina communities depend on it. I urge this General Assembly to prioritize public safety and adequately support our police departments and sheriff's offices. Thank you all for having me today. Thank you, Leader.
And now we'll have Julie Von Hafen.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to focus a little bit around our education budget. We know that the failure of the Republican supermajority to produce a state budget by the start of this fiscal year is just another harm that's been inflicted upon North Carolina public schools by the majority party. Year after year, the refusal to uphold the constitutional duty to our students to fully fund our schools has dealt blow after blow after blow to our students and teachers and the 1.5 million public school children across our state. Now, with this delayed budget, our public education system will be hurt yet again by the party who claims to put kids first. When the fiscal year began on July 1st without a new budget, all of our state's non-recurring appropriations ended, which amounts to about $124 million budget cut for North Carolina public schools around the state. While some of that money is in both our House and Senate proposed budgets, none of it is currently available despite year-round schools already beginning the 2023-2024 school year and our traditional schools set to open in about 6 weeks. How can we possibly ask our administrators to begin operating our schools when they don't even know what the state appropriation is going to be to their districts? On top of not knowing their budget, schools don't know how much teachers will be paid because no salary schedule has been passed. The Republican budgets offer far less than what our students, our schools, and our teachers deserve. And with the current impasse in negotiations, our school personnel are getting the worst option, nothing at all. Would you accept a contract to start a job with an undefined salary? That is exactly what Republicans are asking our teachers to do at this point, accept jobs for uncertain pay. How can a teacher plan their family finances when they don't even know how much Republican leadership will decide to pay them? The consequences of the failure to pass a budget extends to hiring. North Carolina saw an almost 60% increase in teacher vacancies last fall and needs over 5,000 teachers. Our children need teachers, and yet Republican leadership cannot help our districts hire because they don't know how much they can offer these teachers to be paid. Our state continues to hemorrhage experienced teachers, and Republican leadership has failed to take the basic steps to make hiring just even remotely viable. Under the Democratic budget proposal, our North Carolina public schools would receive the full funding that they need to educate our kids. We called for raises that would actually be competitive, attracting new teachers and retaining the veteran teachers we already have. And we called for the upholding of our constitutional duty to fully fund the Leandro plan. As Republicans continue to fail to pass a budget, they are leaving our school districts in limbo with the school year just weeks away and no clarity on how much money they can expect. Despite their damage, their failure to pass a budget does to our schools, we have found time to pass many bills interfering with our classrooms by passing bills like Senate Bill 49, which would create distrust between students and teachers and parents, and will harm students at a time that we should be doing everything we can to support them. And now just today, an even worse bill, Senate Bill 20, is going to be heard in House Education after session today. I can't even begin to talk about all the terrible parts of this bill, but we're going to be hearing another bill which feigns to give rights to parents, but is just a license for book banning committees to run rampant and groups like Moms for Liberty to get superintendents fired for violations of the, quote, fundamental right to parent. Why? Why are we spending time on these matters when our students are trying to learn in classrooms without a permanent full-time teacher? Why are we spending time legislating how kids should seek out counseling at school when we don't even have enough counselors to see them? Why are we spending time arguing about what books should be read in the school library when school districts don't even have the funding to buy the books they need? It's honestly a distraction and a waste of time when all of our time should be spent getting this budget done for the next 2 years so that we can hire the teachers we need, they can get paid a living and a professional wage, and our students can receive the basic education that they are guaranteed in our Constitution. It's not hard. Let's get to work.
Thank y'all. Good afternoon. I'm Wesley Harris, represent District 105 in Mecklenburg County. I'm going to be talking a little bit about helping working families in North Carolina and honestly the revenue worries of this budget and what we're facing here in North Carolina. So working families need help today, not whenever the Republicans have time to get around to actually passing a budget. And it's been even more shocking this time because I was optimistic this year. We were on the fastest timeline I have ever seen since I've been up here on when we were going to get a budget done. We passed the House budget before we even got the consensus revenue forecast back in early May, which is way ahead of schedule. Then the Senate did it way ahead of schedule, and then it has just hit a roadblock here. And as it's hitting a roadblock, people across North Carolina are suffering. People who are just witnessing and experiencing the most extreme economic anxiety we can imagine are suffering because they do not have the help from the state that they need and that they deserve. Again, Democratic budget priorities earlier in this year showed what we could do and what we should be doing. We proposed raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, establishing universal paid family and medical leave, and expanding child care subsidies, things that would help North Carolina families today. But instead, North Carolinians are getting nothing while the closed-door negotiations continue with seemingly very little to no results. And so every day that the legislature fails to produce a budget is another day that the state employees do not see a raise and that our retirees on fixed income do not see cost of living adjustments. And this shouldn't be a partisan issue. Even Republican members of the Council of State have spoken out about the need for better raises to recruit and retain talent in our state agencies. So for now, the failure to produce a state budget in time for this fiscal year, which we're now on day 12 of, is leaving most North Carolinians in a very tough place. And to go to the revenue situation, for how amazing of a financial situation we found ourselves in just a few years ago, billions upon billions upon billions of dollars there for us to invest in our people, Republican leadership has squandered all the potential to make the needed and necessary investments so that we could expand opportunity into every single corner of this state. For the first time since I've been here, we had a downward revision in our consensus revenue forecast. And that should spread alarm bells to absolutely everybody. These consensus revenue forecasts are the most conservative estimates you could possibly have. Because again, it impacts the entire budget, so you cannot be wrong. And again, earlier in the year, we celebrated because there was a $3.8 billion surplus in collections. That $3.8 billion only gave us about 1.7% more revenue in nominal terms this year than last year, a year that we had 7% inflation. And so in real terms, we can't even afford the budget that we passed last year in terms of actually getting resources and needs to the people of North Carolina. And so, you know, it's terrifying. We need to make these investments. And when we're looking at a downward revision, again, it was only a few million dollars, but when it's a conservative forecast and we can't even afford what we did last year, that's alarm bells. And when we're facing a 25% vacancy rate in state employment positions, salary raises that aren't even close to keeping up with inflation over the past few years, and a pension plan that can no longer guarantee the quality of retirement that we promise, that we vow our state employees that we're going to give them when they devote their lives and careers to the state of North Carolina. And so instead of working to address these issues, Republicans are huddling in back doors, figuring out how they can cut our taxes even more when our state is already struggling to provide the basic needs our citizens, our state citizens depend on. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day, and it certainly didn't fall in one either. And how long can we expect to maintain our celebrated #1 state in the country for business when we don't have the money to invest in infrastructure, and we don't have the money to put a quality teacher in every classroom, and we don't have the political will to invest in opportunity instead of the how low can you go tax policy and tax culture of the past 12 years? North Carolinians deserve more, and they need more. And this current budget process is nowhere close to what we should be doing. So I'll turn it back over to Leader Reeves for any questions y'all may have.
All right, and thank you again to all of our members for being here. We got a pretty darn full crowd. We can have caucus after this, so thank you all for being here. But with that being said, happy to take any questions. Yes, ma'am. Conversations have been had with everybody. Our Democratic members are always good about talking to us, giving us the information they have, but they're in, but I think to not speaking for them, but I think they would tell you they're in the same position as a lot of their Republican colleagues. The negotiations that are going on right now seem to be going at a much higher level. We do talk directly. I'm one of those just don't like to start talking about what we do or don't talk about. I have not been given information to tell me we're any nearer to a budget. Yes, ma'am. I mean, I would love to tell you that I've got some insight into what we're doing, and I would be happy to tell you at a macro level what seems to be going on about the assault on public education. But about this specific bill, no warning it was coming, no idea what the thought process is. Happy to have anybody here who may have been informed ahead of time. Okay, looks like all of us were in the same boat.
Many of us, what we would say would be speculative.
Right, exactly. I mean, you know, and it's the same as a lot of these other bills. And I think here's my concern, and this goes back what Representative Harris was talking about our position with business. It's one thing to recruit businesses and to be able to get them here. It's another thing to be able to develop a workforce. And what has been clear, and I don't think is being hidden anymore, is that there is an all-out assault on public education. And the reason there's an all-out assault on public education is because of who it educates. And it educates 90% of our population. We have turned into, we've regressed 200 years where we believe that if you're on this end of the pay scale, see what bill was that we have now that you can get a tax write-off for sending your kid to private school? I remember which bill was that? Yeah, 823. I mean, you know, we're at a point now where we want to do everything we can to finance those who have the most and make sure they get the best education. But we take folks who work every single day, a lot of them being the law enforcement that Attorney General Stein was talking about, a lot of them being the state employees that we brought up, a lot of them being teachers, people like that, people who have to get out here and work every day. We're doing everything we can to take away the opportunities their children are going to have through public education, where every other first world country on earth has recognized that the best hope that you have as a country is to educate everybody, to give to those who don't have, to give them opportunity. Every other first world country has recognized that, and we're suddenly in a state where we're saying, nope, we don't even want you to get the basics. We've got people running for office that don't even want to have science taught in public education, but we're recruiting bioscience companies. So again, I think that this bill to me is nothing more than the continued assault on public education. And at some point in time, voters have got to make a decision. You know what? I'd actually rather for my kids to have an opportunity. But if voters keep deciding, that's fine. Let my kids not get educated. Let my kids not have opportunities. Then we're going to continue to see this type of legislation come. This is the type of legislation that people ought to be running up here and protesting. Because you're already doing your best to run teachers out of public education, not run teachers out of all education, just run them out of public education. And then doing things like these to make it an untenable environment is reprehensible. Just my opinion, but thank you.
Opinion belongs.
Yes.
4 years ago, we didn't have a budget at all, a 2-year budget. Everybody, it was a different setup in the parameters, but, based on your arguments, would you say the legislative and executive branches were delinquent in their duties to carry out a budget in 2019?
No, because those were two different factions having two different opinions about the direction that the state ought to go. Right now, everybody that's having a disagreement about this budget is all on the same boat. They all have the same vision. They all have the same thoughts. It's akin to this. If you and I were having a discussion about what we're going to cook for dinner tonight, we have a legitimate disagreement. We don't live in the same household. If I can't figure out how to work it out with my wife and kids, I got a problem. And that's what's happening right now. You're talking about people who have shared their vision for 14 years together now. 14 years that they have shared a vision and what this state ought to look like. And now we're asking them to get in a room and get it done on time, and it hasn't gotten done on time. So no, this is nowhere near what we were looking at 4 years ago.
Follow-up, it still created the same result as for instance, Representative Von Hafen said, school districts not knowing how much they could pay for people, pay their teachers, capital costs being delayed, all these other things. So I understand what you're saying, but it's still, it still led to the same result, did it not?
No, because you know what happened after that delay 4 years ago? Last cycle, we went past the budget that we could agree on and got passed and got voted on. That's what government's supposed to look like. So right now, my position is if you can't come to agreement amongst yourselves, then maybe we shouldn't have single party government. Go right ahead.
And another thing, in 2019, we passed a lot of mini budgets as well. So a good bulk of the budget that we could actually have consensus on was actually passed. And the difference now is we have much higher inflation than we had in 2019, where inflation was pretty much non-existent. And so the fact that, the House budget was bad with raises, Senate budget was downright terrible. And so that's what they're negotiating on. And so the fact that we're doing that with inflation, with people's money not going as far as it was and needing to have those investments, makes it 10 times worse. And so we were able to get a lot of raises done in 2019 through those mini budgets before the final stalemate of the entire total budget. And so it's a completely different situation this year.
The House Republican budget this year, their raises are actually pretty closer to what Cooper's proposal was. Y'all are House members. So do you think it's worth that? Both Berger and Moore said that raises aren't what they're still arguing about as taxes and finance package, but that it's worth the delay if it ends up higher raises for state employees and teachers, if that's something that the House Republicans are pushing or the Senate doesn't want.
Well, I think you've kind of answered your own question there, Dawn. It sounds like they've already agreed on the raise. So therefore, we're not waiting for that. And so therefore, it's not worth it, because if we've already agreed on the raises, then let's go ahead and get that part of the budget done.
Well, with taxes, the Senate wants to cut taxes and everything else.
Right.
Do you think it's worth whatever delay
Well, my response would be on that is simply this, is that there's not a need in this budget to address tax cuts at all. So because there's not a need, you can pass a budget this year. And if you want to address tax cuts in a separate bill, you got every right and every ability to. So to me, no, it's not worth it because, again, it doesn't have to be tied into it. It's just like if we were holding up everything because we wanted to rename a river. You know, it has nothing to do with the budget. The tax cuts have nothing to do with what we're going to do on the budget. The reason we tie things to the budget is because that forces everybody to get it passed. And I really think, and I completely disagree with that mode of doing business anyway. I think that this throwing everything in the kitchen sink in the budget that you can't get passed as a separate bill is bad policy. So no, I would not agree that that's good. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, in terms of the tax, again, when we're talking about these tax cuts, it's a schedule to eliminate the corporate income tax. It's a schedule to further reduce the income tax, which again, our standard deduction is high enough where a lot of people in North Carolina actually don't even pay an income tax. So the people who are benefiting from this are the people who were able to survive this inflationary period better off because the stock market's done great. Corporate profits have done great. And so the people who are actually getting rewarded by any of these tax cuts are not the people who have been suffering these past couple years. And so it's just, you know, and like I said, we are in a red alarm situation in terms of our revenue and actually being able to afford the bare necessities of what people demand for our government. And the fact that they still want to cut taxes more, they're trying to starve. They're trying to starve the government because they know that their policies and what they want to propose are not popular with the voters. And so what they want to do is put us in a situation where I'd love to help you out. I'd love to give you a nice raise. I'd love to pave that road that's congested every year, but we just don't have the money. Because that's easier for them than going in and like, I would really like to cut the education budget by 10%. I'd really love to continue having DOT not having the money that they need. And so they're just doing it in a disingenuous way, and we're all going to end up suffering because of it.
Yes, sir.
There's about 14 sections of the bill, so it's hard to kind of encapsulate that in just a few minutes. But I think some of the most worrisome parts are the attack on our superintendents. One part of the bill requires if there's well, first of all, it creates a new cause of action for parents to sue schools for a violation of what I said the fundamental right to parent is. That's very concerning because that is not a defined term. If they're successful in court and 5 of these affidavits are submitted to a school district, your superintendent could be fired by a parent, basically. That is extremely worrisome when we look at the overall view of what's happening in our school districts right now with the attacks, you know, that we're seeing at school board meetings, you know, on book banning, on curriculum, on hiring, on every aspect of what's going on in our schools. So that one part is probably the most concerning to me. There's lots of other things around mental health for students, you know, not giving, again, restricting access to mental health for students in schools. That is extremely concerning as well. There's also a lot of other things in this bill that were in the budget bill. So I don't know, I think Laura asked about, you know, why are we seeing this? But like a lot of things they pulled out of the budget bill and put into the standalone bill. So I'm not sure if that has anything to do with the negotiations. But those elements that were in the budget bill, we already ran amendments on. We talked about while we were debating the budget, and those are all very concerning as well.
What do you think about that, after what you're saying, there's always policy in the budget, and it's looking like there's probably going to be some education policies, and that being tied to, you know, the teacher raises, but then also things that regulate how to teach about race and gender.
What was the question?
I was saying, you were talking about, like, what else about it being tied to where you get the raises, but then you also have
Well.
policy changes, and, will you not vote as a caucus for it? How do you weigh it?
I think everyone weighs how they're going to vote themselves. We don't vote as a caucus usually on the budget because it's so complicated and there's so many elements to it. But honestly, like even if a teacher gets a certain amount of a raise, if their working conditions are so stressful and cumbersome and all these things that they're putting on teachers at this point, even if I was getting a 5% raise, do I really want to subject myself to all the other things that are going to be in that budget? Curriculum, putting every bit of your curriculum, your lesson plans online, being just subject to that. And as a substitute teacher myself, being in the classroom and just seeing the day-to-day of what they have to do to add that on to my daily job, I just can't imagine that would be a recipe for success for hiring the 5,000 teachers that we need. Oh, definitely both. I think they're both major issues at this point.
May I speak to your question about the practical implications of the bill and as it affects superintendents? Superintendent tenure is already 2.8 years, which is not a long time for superintendents to be in charge of schools. And so I would imagine that would make North Carolina less attractive for superintendents to come to our state, and there's a nationwide shortage of superintendents. Second thing, and I speak this as a former member of Guilford County's Board of Education, is a lot of our school system attorneys are paid by the hour. And if we're having to defend lawsuits that come because of this bill, that's less money going directly into the classroom and more money going for our school districts defending lawsuits.
Okay, well, we thank everybody for being here, and again, thank all the members that are here, and thank you again, Attorney General Stein. And obviously, I have to talk to you about it anytime, and I'm sure you'll be hearing more about SB 90. So thank you, everybody.